It's time for Spotlight with your host, Mike Balsamo, shining the spotlight on the important people and events that make up our exciting and vibrant community. Now here's your host, Mike Balsamo.
Good morning and welcome in at Spotlight. Palm Beaches, Treasure Coast, Broward County, we've got you covered here on the True Oldies channel. With me today, it's a great guest, Rich Vaaler. He's the CEO and principal broker of Vaaler Commercial Real Estate. You can learn more at richvaaler.com. You can call 772-266-9065 to talk to Rich directly. Rich, thank you so much for joining us today. You're a friend of one of the owners of the station, Jeff, and that kind of brought you into our little world here. So thank you so much.
Right. He's my new favorite client.
New favorite client. Rich, we spoke a lot before we went on air here. You kind of have an interesting story, interesting life that led you to this commercial real estate empire that you're working on now. You want to tell us about how you got here?
Sure. I actually went to college to study marine biology. And they told me, if you want to get in that career, you have to get a PhD.
Okay.
And I said, I don't want 6 more years at college.
I don't blame you.
And I took a real estate elective, and I kind of liked it. So then when I graduated, my first job was with a development company in the Virginia Beach area. And my boss said, you're going to be a leasing agent. I had no idea what that was. I thought I was going to be a financial analyst or something. He said, here's some business cards. Go knock on doors and tell them you want to lease these buildings. So I kind of got into it and I liked it, and then did that with another company for a couple of years. And in 1988, when I was 30 years old, I started my own company. I didn't really know what I was doing, didn't have any money. I just really had a passion for the business, and it's all I've really done since then.
It's the passion comes through when you speak with Rich. You can tell he's passionate about real estate. What happened, since you started your business in 1988? Was it all smooth sailing for 40 years? Probably not, right?
No, I think another thing that kind of helped me is my mom had a bookstore when I was just getting started, and she got ripped off by the landlord a little bit.
Really?
And I kind of got defensive and wanted to learn more about it. So I started really helping people with these problems that they had. People that hadn't done this before, they were new to the business, never bought a building, never leased a building. And I kind of really enjoyed that part of it. Sure, you got to make money, you have to get, commissions and earn a living, but it was a kind of a altruistic sense of helping people that were in a jam that didn't have the expertise that I developed, even at a young age.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, when you're a realtor, you are in a position that very few people are in. A lot of people don't understand how it works. Mm-hmm. You get to kind of be their friend and their helper through the process, and that's something that passion that fuels you.
Yeah, I look at myself more of an advisory role as a guide rather than just a sales guy. I don't talk people into buying things. I help them get what they want or help them not get things that would get them in trouble. I talk them out of some things, but I didn't, it hasn't always been an easy ride. In the 80s was pretty good. 90s were good. And about 2010, the wheels came off.
Yeah.
The economy, we had the great financial crisis, 2008, 9, 10, depending on whenever that hit you in your life. And most of my agents left. I had a big firm. My wife left me. Wow. I filed bankruptcy. I was a country song. That's what I tell people. Yeah. And I actually played drums in a country band. So I know what that's all about. And then about a year or two later, I re-met my college girlfriend who was living here in South Florida. And she had gotten separated. It's a long story, but we got remarried. That's what brought me here from Virginia. I was a D.C., Virginia guy.
Yeah.
I've been in the Treasure Coast now for about 15 years. And this is home. I love it. I still have an office there, but most of my work is here in the Treasure Coast.
I'm here 17 years, so I got you beat by 2. I mean, I'm with you. I'm a Floridian now. I'm from New York originally, but there's nothing like Florida. And everyone who comes here to visit me is like, why did I make this move? Why are you the only one here enjoying South Florida? It's a beautiful thing, and we're enjoying it here on the True Oldies channel. Speaking with Rich Vaaler, CEO and principal broker of Vaaler Commercial Real Estate. Go to richvaaler.com. You can call him at 772-266-9065. So what are the differences? A lot of people know realtors, but it seems like everyone does residential real estate. So what is the difference between a commercial realtor and the residential realtor?
So let's start with that term realtor for a second, because a lot of people don't understand that. So the term realtor, and some people call it a realtor, but it's realtor, is actually a branded trademark of the National Association of Realtors.
Yes.
It's a trade association. And if you're a realtor, you're a local board, usually the state and the national level, you pay dues to do that. To have a real estate license doesn't mean you're necessarily a realtor who subscribes to the code of ethics. And there's also no differential between a commercial real estate broker and a residential real estate broker. Same license in Florida, same license in many states. You don't have to have a commercial license or a residential license. So that's kind of the facts on that. The main difference, it really is in the type of property that people buy and sell and own. So the commercial is really something you'd have for your business. The residential is something you live in, or you might rent it out as an investment, but it's a residential living quarters. Commercial is office, industrial, retail, land, and we also deal in apartments from an investment standpoint.
Yes.
But that's kind of the where the fork in the road is. And I don't do any residential sales. It's a specialty, just like commercial. I'm an expert. I've been a witness in courts. I've been labeled as an expert. I've written a book about commercial real estate. But that's a totally different area or field of expertise than residential. If I had to sell my own house, I would hire. I have a friend who's a residential agent. She handles our apartments, for example. And so I think if you're going to work with a real estate agent to do commercial real estate, you should find, well, obviously call me, but if you can't call me, call someone who does that specifically. Don't have your residential realtor friend help you go buy an office, unless they have experience, obviously. If they do, great. But most do one or the other.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that. You just don't deal with residential. You focus strictly on commercial. What are some of the nuances maybe that would drive you to commercial over real estate? You said you like to, working with the bigger buildings and kind of looking after the tenants and things like that. Is that what's driven you towards the commercial side? Yeah,
there's really kind of two lanes in that category too. So they're what they call occupiers or users or tenants, people who rent a building for their business, a retail store, an office building. And then there are investors. And then you get into the investment side, there are people who buy single tenant net lease assets like a Wendy's, Burger King, Dollar General. I really focus a lot on that. Or people like my client Jeff that owns a station, they own multi-tenant buildings for investment, office, retail, industrial. So those are the kind of distinctions there. Some also buy land for development. They sell it to, Pulte Homes or some of the big developer builders out there, but most of my clients are they're the investor category or the occupier user category.
So speaking of these people, obviously people buy commercial real estate and they get a little bit older and things happen. You've written a book called Don't Leave It to the Kids. And this is, it sounds funny, but this is the truth. And you've got strategies and processes for people that have a bunch of commercial real estate and are, either passed away or looking to bequeath it, and what they can do for their family down the road.
Right. It sounds like a scary title. Don't leave it to the kids, and it sounds mean if you're one of the kids.
Yeah.
But what started it was I had a call with a woman years ago, and I said I want to talk to you about your warehouse. I have a client that wants to buy it. You want to sell it? She said, no, I'm going to leave it to the kids. And I didn't really know what to say. So I have a coach, the best commercial real estate coach in the world, Massimo Group, out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And my coach said, why do you ask them? Do the kids want the property, or do the kids have the money to take care of it? Do they have the expertise? What if there's a vacancy or the loan is? All these things started popping up. So then I began writing blogs and posts on my website. And then someone said, well, you should write a book about that. So the book is it's only like a quarter of an inch thick. It's not the Bible. It's really like a primer. So especially if you're a senior age like me and you own multi-tenant commercial real estate, you should get the book. It's free on my website. I can mail you a hard copy. It kind of walks through how to transition from that into single tenant net lease properties and then leave that to your kids. So if your children or your heirs inherit a Wendy's, Burger King, that sort of thing, they're really easy to own. They're easy to sell, no hassle, very low risk, absolutely no management responsibilities. So that's what you want to leave your kids. You don't want to leave them a mess. You don't want to leave them a financial burden, especially if you have several kids. Some families have 3, 4, 5 kids. They live in different states. What if they don't want, one says I want to sell, one says I don't want to sell. What I do is I help advise families to avoid all that. So you have a smooth transition of wealth. You keep it in the family. It's called generational wealth transition. That's what I do. I specifically help people with that process.
You don't have to give a specific example or give names, but what would be the process if someone has, say, $20 million in commercial assets, but it's all stuff that requires you to be working on it, and they give it to their 3 kids. Obviously, you don't know the exact parameters, but would you try to put it into a system where they can make money without having to worry about the input that their father is doing?
Sure. So a lot of my clients are again, my age or older, and they've been doing this their whole career. They love doing this. They love leasing space, like Jeff. They love fixing it up. They love all the negotiation and all that. Their kids may be school teachers, doctors, lawyers, and they don't know that stuff. They don't understand it. They don't want to deal with it. So what I would recommend is start a process, have a conversation with your kids, and begin a process of selling those assets, doing a 1031 exchange, tax deferred exchange. It's an IRS code, and then transition those properties into simpler to own, simpler to manage properties. You keep all the value. A lot of times you increase the value by doing that. And then you have it all set up so that when you do leave it to your children, now you've left them something nice and tidy with a bow on top, and they will love you for it. They will listen. I've had a lot of clients that were not cursing their family, but one uncle left a woman a building. It had a vacancy. It had an elevator that was broken, air conditioner that needed repair. She lived in another state.
Yeah, where do you even start with that?
It was not a gift. I mean, and we ended up selling it for $3.5 million. It would have sold for $5 million if we had started the process earlier. And that's just one example of a real story where you want to leave your kids something that is a gift. You don't want to leave them a mess, really.
Yeah, I never thought about that. You'd mentioned the book. If we wanted to grab a copy, what's the best way to do it?
It's on my website. I have another website called eldercre.com. That's elder like elderly people, and CRE for commercial real estate. Go to eldercre.com. You can download a PDF copy. If you want a hard copy or you want to get multiple copies, I've got boxes of them. Just send me an email, and I'll drop them off, meet you for a coffee, or put them in the mail, however you want it.
Again, we're speaking with Rich Vaaler. This is Spotlight, Palm Beaches, Treasure Coast, Martin County. We've got you covered. He's the CEO and principal broker of Vaaler Commercial Real Estate. RichVaaler.com, 772-266-9065. Rich, I imagine you're a little busy. Baby boomers, like my mother and all of her siblings, they all bought property. This is what their investments were. And her father, my grandfather, all had all these properties that he kind of left to my mom and her siblings. None of me and my cousins are really into the property thing. None of us have any yet. We're just kind of looking at our parents' property. So I think was baby boomers, is this kind of what they did as investments? They wanted to buy property. Maybe the younger generations don't. So you kind of are the perfect shoe and let's find something that works for the younger generation.
Right. I'm 68 years old, born in 1958, so I'm a boomer. My kids wouldn't know what to do with the properties that we own. Yeah. And we are starting, my wife and I are starting that process right now to diversify what we have into the easier to own, simple to manage properties. So I'm walking the talk. I've done a 1031 exchange myself, and we're going through this process with our commercial real estate. Because, the kids that didn't grow up in that environment, didn't grow up in that culture, a lot of times they get it, they inherit it, and they just sell it. Yeah. And the sad thing is, if you're one of these people like me or like Jeff or some of my other clients, and you've worked 20, 30, 40 years building this portfolio of all these wonderful properties, and you leave it to your kids, and the next day they just put it on the market and dump it, they get the cash. Usually they get less than full value because they don't care. They just say, give me the cash.
It's free money, right? Yeah.
And then they also weren't maybe in the habit of investing that like we were. So maybe that gets spent, and then so now it's gone. That all that equity, all that generational wealth can be lost on the next generation, and you don't want that. And if you set it up properly, the kids can inherit those properties and keep them. Or I have a lot of financial planners I work with. I'll say, we'll sell that Wendy's, sell the Dollar General. You'll get it at stepped up basis, so the kids pay no tax on their parents' death. Mm-hmm. And then give that money to your financial advisor. Put it in a 401k. Now you're set for life. You don't have to, maybe you still have to work a little bit, but you keep that asset, you keep that wealth in the family, and you don't just, blow it on cash it out and blow it on trips and things like that. Not everybody does that. But I think that's a smart path as well. If you don't want to own the real estate, put it in something else that's safe, that can feed you, and then give it to your kids down the road.
Rich, you brought it up a couple of times, and we don't have to go deep into it because I know it's a complex subject, but you've mentioned tax a bunch of times. And this is something that comes up a lot with trying to avoid taxes when people pass away. You're moving, not necessarily property, but even just money. Things are going to be taxed. What some of your plans can try to find us a way to skate some of these taxes, or find ways to use legal loopholes to not to give up half of our value.
Right. So I must disclose I'm not a tax advisor, real estate broker. You should get tax advice always, every time. But the way the tax law is written, the 1031 tax deferred exchange, it's not a tax-free, tax deferred exchange. The way it's worded is you can sell a commercial property, and there's a definition of that in my book, and online you can see it too. If you sell that property and buy another one, and go by the rules of the exchange, you don't pay any tax. If you just sell it, you pay capital gains tax, and it might be different in different states depending on where you live or where the property is located. But you will pay the federal government a capital gains tax, and you also pay depreciation recapture. A lot of people don't know what that is. I could explain that another time. So you might sell a property for $2 million and have to pay $500,000 in tax, depending on a lot of things. So that money's just gone. That's down the toilet. If you do a 1031 exchange, you can keep you preserve all that equity, and then sometimes you can buy that and then refinance later and get some of the cash out, or just keep it like that and do it again and again and again. It's called, the what's they call it, exchange till you drop or something like that. There's a phrase for it, but that is a process you can do. The other thing is when your children or your heirs inherit the property, again, seek advice on this. In my case, when my father died, he left the house to my sister and me. We got it at what's called stepped up basis, and in that case, we sold the house, so we didn't pay any capital gains tax. So if that happens, you can sell those properties and then give the money to your advisor, put it in a 401k. Now you've preserved all that equity that's been built up by your father, maybe your grandfather, grandparents, generations, grandmother. I had one client that was just a little old lady, really, and she was about 95 years old. So when you get that property from those people, you can keep it, you can sell it at stepped-up basis. There are a lot of tax advantages if you do it properly. But again, before you do anything, talk to me or a tax advisor and let us kind of put out in front of you some of the options that are available.
I was just going to say, it seems best to know what your options are. And I think a lot of people don't. And especially if you're going through grief with going through someone passing, you're just thinking, just get rid of this.
Yeah, that's the wrong time. They always say kind of wait a year before you make a big decision, and that's the wrong time when a family member dies and you go to the lawyer's office and they give you the will and they say, guess what? You've inherited all this property.
Yeah.
And you're going, great, what do I do with that? Who do I call? Do I call another lawyer, a broker, a tax? You should have all of that sort of mapped out ahead of time. And I encourage my older clients to meet with their children, have a meeting and say, here's what we've got, here's what we're thinking about doing. Does that sound good to you guys? And they might say sure or no, or let's get a plan together and put the plan on the shelf. And then one day down the road, when it happens, you just pull the plan off the shelf and now you execute. It's a much better way to do it than at the funeral.
This is just my own curiosity, Rich, but I would assume that the more children are involved, the more different ideas. I mean, naturally, the more different ideas are going to come up. But it seems like, using someone like you would definitely benefit when there's 4, 5, 6 kids, because there's no way they all want the same thing.
I had a client once that they were really good guys, but I called them old, middle, and young. And I don't want to say their name, but old was like, hey, I'm not buying green bananas. I'm so old. They're not going to, I won't be around for them to turn yellow. I want to sell it right now. The middle guy was sort of indifferent, and the young guy said, hey, I want to hold out for the best price. I don't care if we sell it or not. And so the three of them had a struggle with, what do we do with this property? We ended up selling it at a good price, but dealing with all those different personalities and they're different stages of their life and different aspirations and goals, and it's not a simple thing. So I think getting everybody together around a table and talking about what are the options, what's best for your family and your scenario, because they're all different, and then map out a plan. And I think that's kind of what I'm really in that advisory role at this stage of my career. I'm not, trying to sell people things. I really want to sit down with them, and that's kind of what I've done with Jeff and a couple other clients here on the Treasure Coast is map out a plan.
Yeah, 772-266-9065, Rich Vaaler, richvaaler.com, elderscre.com as well. We're speaking with Rich Vaaler, the CEO and principal broker of Vaaler Commercial Real Estate. That was all great information for the people who, are looking at situations where their parents own it or they own it and they're looking with their children. But what about people who want to start? Obviously, we should call you if we're looking to invest in commercial real estate. But is there maybe like a tip or a piece of advice you give to someone who's looking to invest?
Sure. I actually had a real call the other day. A guy called me, saw my website, and he goes, I've got a little bit of money set aside. I'd like to get into commercial real estate. Where do I start? And I had a long talk with him, and I said, look, if you work with me, great. If you don't work with me, fine. Look at the resources on my website. There's a lot of resources there. Happy to meet with you and talk about it. And a lot of that depends, too, on how much you have to invest, how much headache you want, how much involvement you want. You want to be really involved. You want to work the property. People always tell me they want a value add property. And I laugh because I go, nobody wants a value lose property, right? Nobody wants to go into it and, let's see how much money I can lose. So they all want a value add property, which basically means the rents are below market. I can go in here, I can redo some of the leases, I move the rents up, that makes the value higher. And that could be a small retail center, 4 or 5 tenants, maybe a little office, We own an apartment building, my wife and I. We did that with that. So I would say it depends on each individual where they start. There are a lot of advantages. One of the things on my website is called the Wealth Accelerator. It's under the Resources tab, and it shows you how you can leverage. If you put 20% down, you could own the whole. You don't have to put. Let's say you have $1 million and you put it in the stock market. You have to give your broker $1 million.
Yes.
If you put it in real estate, you can buy $1 million worth with $250,000, and then you're getting the appreciation on the million, and you're getting the depreciation on that. So you get what I call a return stack. There's also I have a short video you can watch called CRE 101. Kind of walks through some of the terminology and the steps, and you get a much higher return with that kind of result than you do just 8% from a 401k. The difference is it's not liquid. You can't call your broker and say, I need that $250,000 back today. In the stock market, you can get it back in a day or two. So I would say, have a chat with somebody like me or with me and say, let's look at your how old are you? How much do you have to invest? What are your plans? How much do you want to be involved? And what's your aversion to risk? You okay with risk? You okay if you lose some of that? And then we kind of map out a plan from that.
You're listening to Spotlight, Palm Beaches, Broward County, Treasure Coast. We've got you covered. This is the True Oldies channel. I'm Mike Balsamo, speaking with Rich Vaaler, the CEO and principal broker of Vaaler Commercial Real Estate, richvaaler.com, eldercre.com, 772-266-9065. Just want to learn a little bit more about you, Rich, before we wrap it up. Any quirky properties? I'm sure over the years, there's been some quirky properties. Maybe someone wanted you to sell their office building, but it was haunted. There's just weird things happening in some of these buildings.
I have had a few. I was from Leesburg, Virginia, and it's an old historic town. There were buildings that people swore to me they were haunted. I did sell a quarry that had been filled in. And we sold that a couple years ago, and there was rumor that Al Capone was in there, but we don't know. But it was filled in. But I've had some quirky, and the quirky story too. I guess it's not quirky, but people tell me all the time, Rich, you're in commercial, not residential, so at least it's not emotional. And the other thing I would say to people is very emotional. A lot of my clients are very, very high net worth. Some are maybe close to billionaire level, and you get two of them on the phone talking about a deal. One's telling me the other guy's a jerk, the other one's saying he's an idiot, and they get really hot-headed sometimes. And so it is a very emotional thing. And one last thing I wanted to mention too, we didn't touch on the occupier or the leasing side of it, but I also help people with that. If you have a business, you're starting a business, and you need to lease space, there are three main kinds. There's a triple net lease, which is in retail. If you're leasing a store, that means you pay the rent and all the other expenses. If you're an office tenant, it's usually a gross lease or a full service lease. All that's included. If you're leasing a warehouse, it's usually called modified gross, which is you pay taxes, insurance, utilities, the landlord pays taxes, insurance, and you pay the utilities and the rent. So if you're getting into that, there's a lot of things to look out for. You shouldn't just enter into one of those without legal advice, and also a really good commercial broker kind of helping you negotiate some of the terms, how to get out of it if you need to. What if something breaks? Who fixes it? How do you handle the rental escalations? There's a lot of those nuances in all the commercial leases that you really need a guide to walk you through if you haven't done it before.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I've only bought one house in my life, and I refinanced it once. It's the most stressful thing that you're ever going to go through. I can imagine, you're doing this multiple times a month, and also with a lot higher stakes. Granted, it's people's houses, that's important, but talking about multi-million-dollar thing, I'm sure that the stress can be there. Has there been something that stands out, maybe like one that almost didn't go through? Because even with my mortgage, everything was there. It seemed like 3 minutes before we needed to close. We need this. We need that. It was like, where were you guys 2 weeks ago?
Well, every as a broker, every week before closing is we call Hell Week. And your stomach goes up and down like a roller coaster. The deal's on, the deal's off. And this is I can't say any names. This is a true story, happened recently. So the buyer says, I'm going to buy this property, but I'm going on a cruise for a month. And I said, great. So sometimes people change their mind. I had one client die, and that deal actually he died after closing. But in this case, so the guy comes back from the cruise and he said, I've got to have a medical procedure, so now we have to put the closing off another couple days. And I was like, oh man, this is gonna not happen. So then we get that closing scheduled, and then the seller says, I got sick, I can't make it to closing, we're gonna have to put it back another day. So this went on like all week. We finally closed it at like 4:30 on Friday. I got the funds wired to my account like at 4:59.
Wow.
But those are the kind of things as a broker that that make you crazy a little bit. But yeah, we got it done.
Rich, what's the best way to get in touch with you? I'm sure people have some questions for you.
Well, my email's good, rich@vaaler.us. That's VAALER.us. My cell phone also is 703-431-4513. And then the office number that you mentioned earlier, that goes right to my office. I have a receptionist who answers the phone, Lori, there for me. So any way you want to talk, and I'm here in Treasure Coast. I'm happy to meet you for a coffee. You want to do a phone call, Zoom call? I do this all the time. It's no problem at all. Just let me know, and happy to get on one of those options and have a conversation.
You're a wealth of knowledge in this space, Rich, and you're just a nice guy. You seem like a good guy to grab coffee with. If you're in this headspace and wanting to learn more, Rich is the perfect guy to educate you, I would say.
I always say I'm the nicest guy I've ever met. No,
we love to hear it.
No, but I like what I do, and I like helping people, so that comes across.
Would you like to give your cell one more time?
Sure, 703-431-4513.
Rich, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Spotlight.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.